Have you ever peeled your eyes open in the morning, the world still fuzzy around the edges, and felt something nagging at you, a dull ache that won't shake off, a strange heaviness, a whisper of unease that's more than just the weight of sleep? Maybe you've brushed it aside, chalked it up to the years piling on. But deep down, there's that flicker. What if it's not just age? If you're over 60 or you've got someone you'd fight the world to protect who is, this isn't about ignoring those quiet morning murmurs. It's about tuning in, catching the hints your body drops when the sun's barely up. Hints that could mean cancer's lurking in the shadows. Today, we're digging into 5 signs that hit you right when you wake up. Signs that could be your body's desperate plea to dodge a bullet. One of the deadliest diseases out there. These aren't just random twinges, they're alarms, urgent enough to make you sit up and act fast. Hang with me until the end, because by the time we're through, you'll know what to spot, why it's a big deal, and how to wrestle your health back from the brink. The last one's a sleeper. Most folks miss it, and it could be the difference between thriving and losing everything. Before we dive in, if you're ready to grab your years and keep cancer from stealing them, smash that like button. It keeps me digging up these life or death lessons. New here? Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss a beat. Love this? Comment number 1 below. Not your thing, drop a number 0 so I can tweak it next round. Let's roll. Imagine this. You're coasting into your later years, maybe savoring the slow drip of coffee on a quiet porch, the world softer around the edges. You've earned that peace. Decades of hustle, raising kids, weathering storms, but then there's this nudge, a headache that won't budge, a joint that creaks louder than the floorboards, a weariness that clings like damp air. You figure it's the toll of time, right? Who doesn't feel a little beat up after 60? But here's the kicker. Sometimes those morning groans aren't just the clock winding down. They're your body waving a red flag, begging you to listen before it's too late. Cancer's no joke. One of the top killers globally, a shadow that doesn't care about your bank account or your plans. Doctors hammer it home. Catch it early, and you've got a fighting chance. Let it fester, and it's a brutal uphill climb. I've seen it play out. Loved ones who spotted the signs and won, others who ignored them and slipped away. That's why we're here, to zero in on 5 wake-up calls that could mean cancer's knocking. These aren't theories. They're forged in real lives. My Uncle Joe's cough, Mrs. Lan's headaches, and I'm laying them bare so you can act. Ready to take the reins? Let's start with the first sign. First up is persistent headaches that slam into you like a freight train the moment you wake. You know that feeling, your head's pounding before you even sit up. A dull throb or a sharp jab that makes you grit your teeth and wonder if you slept wrong. It's not just a late night or too much wine. It could be your body screaming for help, maybe brain cancer or a tumor pressing on nerves you didn't know could scream so loud. My neighbor, Mrs. Lan, 68, lived this hell. She'd shuffle out to her garden every morning, hands clamped to her temples, moaning about old lady headaches. I'd spot her through my window, wincing as she watered her roses, and she'd laugh it off. Too much thinking, she'd say, popping pills like they were mints. I let it slide for weeks, figuring she knew best, but one day she dropped her watering can, eyes squeezed shut, and I'd had enough. I dragged her to the clinic, half expecting a scolding about stress, but the doc ordered an MRI. When the results came, we both sat there, stunned. A tumor, small but real, growing in her brain. She stared at the floor. I stared at her, but the doctor was steady. Caught early, it was fixable. Surgery was rough, weeks of recovery, tears, fear. But she's back now, tending her flowers, headache-free. That pain wasn't age. It was a lifeline she almost missed. Experts say morning headaches that stick around, especially with dizziness, vision glitches, or memory fog, could mean cancer's staking a claim, or even blood flow issues starving your brain. It's not every ache. Tension, bad pillows, even anxiety can spark them. But if it's there every day, relentless, don't mess around. Mrs. Lon's a survivor because she acted. My old friend Mr. Bao wasn't. He ignored his blamed the weather and brain cancer took him at 64. I felt it myself, a nagging headache I brushed off, only to luck out with a clean bill after a scare. Don't gamble, see a doctor, demand a scan. Ginger tea might ease it, a hot towel might dull it, but if it's glued to you, run to the ER. Men notice your sharp mind, cancer notices when it fades. I remember Mrs. Lon's first day back. She looked at me, grinned it, and said, "I owe you one." That's what listening does, it saves. My own scare taught me the same. A week of throbbing, a panicked visit, and a sigh of relief when it was just tension. But I'll never ignore it again. Neither should you. If your head's a war zone every morning, act fast. It's your first line of defense. Next comes joint pain that sinks its teeth in when you roll out of bed, stiff and sore like your bones are staging a revolt. Sure, you've earned some aches, years of lugging bags, chasing grandkids, dancing through life, but this is different. It's the kind that freezes you mid-step, a deep, gnawing ache that's worse in the morning, hinting at bone cancer or something like tuberculosis eating at your frame. My buddy Mr. Trung, 66, learned this lesson the hard way. He'd limp out to his porch every dawn, cursing his knees and hips, chuckling about old man joints. I'd wave from my yard, joking he needed a cane, but one morning he couldn't even stand. 3 weeks of pain he'd laughed off. I drove him to the hospital, griping about his stubbornness, and the x-rays hit us like a punch. Bone tuberculosis, not cancer, but close enough to rattle us. Treatment was a slog, months of pills, physical therapy, pain that made him grit his teeth. But he's walking now, slower but kicking. Docs say morning joint pain that won't quit, especially with swelling or stiffness, could mean cancers chewing through your bones or infections playing a cruel mimic. Mr. Trung dodged a bullet. My Aunt Hoa didn't. Ignored her hip pain, landed with bone cancer, gone at 63. I've felt it too, a knee twinge I ignored, only to freak out until a doc cleared me. It's not just wear and tear, it's a siren. Warm compresses soothe, stretching loosens. But if it's relentless, get x-rays, blood work, stat. Cancer doesn't wait for your excuses. It grows when you do. Men notice your steady gait. Keep it strong. I'll never forget Trung's face when he got the news. Pale, eyes wide, but he fought back. My own joint scare came after a long hike, 2 days of stiffness, a doctor's visit, and a clean slate. But it's stuck with me. If your joints are yelling every morning, don't whisper back. Shout for help. It's not about pride, it's about living. Then there's fatigue and memory decline, a weariness that wraps you like a wet blanket. Even after 8 hours of shut-eye, you wake up drained, words slipping through your fingers, your mind a haze, and it's not just getting old. This could be cancer's footprint, leukemia, lymphoma, or something sapping your thyroid or blood sugar. My co-worker, Mrs. Fong, 63, walked this tightrope. She'd stumble into work, eyes hollow, forgetting deadlines she'd set herself. "I'm just worn out," she'd mumble, blaming long nights, stress, everything but the truth. I'd catch her staring at her desk, lost, and one day she couldn't recall a client's name, someone she'd known for years. I pushed her to see a doctor, teasing about needing a vacation, and the blood test dropped a bomb. Early leukemia. She fought hard, chemo, exhaustion, hope, and won because we caught it fast. She's back now, cracking jokes, her memory snapping like a whip. That fatigue wasn't age, it was a warning she nearly missed. Experts say persistent tiredness with memory lapses could mean cancers draining your reserves, or diabetes and thyroid issues throwing curveballs. My Uncle Vin ignored his. Lymphoma took him at 66. I've been there, a foggy morning I blamed on coffee, only to sweat it out until tests came clean. Don't shrug it off. Get blood work, check your hormones. Lemon water lifts, a nap helps, but if it's stuck, see a doc now. Men notice your fire. Don't let cancer dumb it. Phuong's first day back, she hugged me, whispering, "You saved me." My own brush with fatigue came after a flu. Days of fog, a quick check, and relief it was nothing. But if you're waking up empty every day, don't wait. Your spark's worth fighting for. Fourth, wheezing and mucus in your mouth. A rattling cough that greets you like a broken horn. You hack, you spit, your chest feels wet and tight, and it's not a passing bug. This could be lung cancer creeping in, or COPD tossing a smokescreen. My Uncle Joe, 69, lived this fight. He'd cough every morning, spitting into a hanky, grinning about smoker's lungs from his old habit. I'd hear him through the wall, that wheeze like a busted fan, and nagged him to get checked. Later, he'd growl until blood flecked his spit one day. I dragged him to the ER, lung cancer, early stage. Surgery took a chunk, radiation burned, but he's breathing now, grumbling at me for saving him. That wheeze wasn't nostalgia, it was a flare. Studies say 90% of early lung cancer cases cough like that. Persistent, wet, sometimes bloody. My buddy Long didn't heed his late-stage lung cancer, gone at 67. If it's there every morning with mucus or breathlessness, don't wait. Get a chest scan. Honey tea soothes, steam clears, but if it lingers, see a doctor today. Men, notice your voice. Keep it loud. Joe's first clean breath after treatment. He looked at me, eyes wet, and muttered, "Should have listened." My own cough scare, a week of hacking, a scan, and a pass, taught me fast. If your lungs are rattling every dawn, don't muffle it. Check it. Last, loss of appetite that smacks you awake. No hunger, no craving, just a void where breakfast used to be. It's not just skipping toast, it's cancer. Stomach, esophageal, liver, twisting your gut. My Aunt Mai, 70, showed me this raw. She'd sit at the table, pushing rice around, frowning. "Food's off." I'd whip up her old favorites. Noodles, pork, but she'd pick at it, shedding pounds she couldn't spare. I hounded her to the clinic, expecting a diet fix, but the scope found stomach cancer. Tiny, but real. Surgery was hell, but she's eating now, bossing me around again. That emptiness wasn't fussiness, it was a cry. Docs say persistent no appetite mornings with nausea or pain could mean cancer's rooting in. My neighbor Tuan ignored his. Liver cancer took him at 65. If food's a stranger every dawn, get an endoscopy now. Juice teases, snacks cokes, but if it's gone, see a doc fast. Men, notice your glow, fuel it. Mai's first real meal post-op, she smiled. "You're a pest, but I'm glad." My own scare, a week of no hunger, a check, and a shrug of relief stuck with me. If your stomach's silent every morning, don't ignore it, act. And then there's persistent abdominal pain or bloating, that gnawing ache or swollen tightness that greets you like an uninvited guest when you wake. It's not just last night's dinner sitting heavy or a little gas you can shrug off. It's a deep, stubborn discomfort that lingers in your gut, a quiet rumble or sharp twist that makes you pause before you even get your slippers on. In old age, this could be more than a passing annoyance. It might be cancer, ovarian, pancreatic, or colorectal, whispering its presence through your belly. My friend's mom, Mrs. Henish, 71, taught me this one in a way I'll never forget. She'd wake up every morning, clutching her stomach, grimacing as she shuffled to the kitchen. "Just indigestion," she'd mutter, sipping tea and waving off my worried looks. I'd see her hunched over the sink, her face tight, and she'd joke about eating too much rice the night before. But it didn't stop. Weeks of bloating, a dull ache that turned sharp some days, and I couldn't stand it anymore. I practically dragged her to the doctor, expecting a lecture on diet, but the ultrasound hit us like a thunderclap. Ovarian cancer, early but real, ballooning in her abdomen. She sat there, hands trembling, while I tried to process it. Surgery was a beast, months of recovery, fear we wouldn't name. But she's here now, cooking again, scolding me for hovering. That bloating wasn't a fluke, It was a flare she nearly ignored. Doctors say persistent abdominal pain or bloating in the morning, especially with weight loss, nausea, or changes in your bathroom habits, could mean cancer's rooting deep in your gut. It's sneaky. Ovarian cancer loves to hide behind normal bloating. Pancreatic cancer masks itself as a sour stomach. Colorectal cancer mimics a bad meal. Mrs. Hand's lucky. She caught it before it spread too far. But I've seen the other side. My old neighbor, Mr. Duke, 68, ignored his stomach cramps, called them old age digestion, until pancreatic cancer had him doubled over. Too late to fight. Gone in 6 months. I've felt it myself once, a week of morning bloating after a holiday feast, tight like a drum, and I panicked, ran to the doc. Just gas, thank God, but it burned a lesson into me. Your gut doesn't lie. It's not every twinge, stress, overeating, even constipation can stir it up. But if it's there every day, pressing or puffing you up, don't wait. Mrs. Han's first sign was that bloated belly she hid under loose shirts. Mr. Duke's was the ache he drowned with antacids. Both could have acted sooner, but only one did. I remember the day we got Han's diagnosis. Her eyes locked on the floor, voice barely a whisper. I should have listened. It broke me, but it fired me up too. That's why I'm telling you, if your stomach's growling a warning every morning, pain that stabs or bloating that won't deflate, get it checked. Ultrasounds, CT scans, blood tests, don't mess around. My own scare came after that bloating bout. I'd wake up feeling like I'd swallowed a balloon, and every creak of my chair had me imagining the worst. The doc laughed it off, but I saw Mr. Duke in my head, his thin frame fading. If it's mild, sure, sip peppermint tea, it calms the churn, or try a heating pad to ease the ache. But if it's stuck, if your gut's a battlefield, day after day, see a doctor now. Cancer doesn't care about your excuses. It thrives when you stall, grows when you dismiss. Men notice your strength, your laugh, your energy. Don't let a silent killer sap it. Han's back in her garden now, planting herbs, her belly flat and her spirit fierce. She teases me, "You're worse than my mother." But I see the gratitude in her eyes. That's what acting fast does. It hands you back your life. These signs we've walked through, they're not just background noise, the kind of hum you tune out while sipping your morning tea. They're your body's battle cry, a raw, urgent shout carved from the grit of real lives. Real fights, real wins, and yes, real losses too. Think about it. Mrs. Lund clutching her head every dawn, wincing through her roses until that MRI lit up a tumor she could beat. Mr. Trung hobbling on joints that screamed louder than his stubborn laugh, dodging a bone cancer scare by a hair. Mrs. Fwang dragging through her days, her mind a fog until leukemia showed its face, and she fought it back. Uncle Joe's wheeze rattling like a broken engine, spitting blood before lung cancer got reined in. Aunt Mai pushing food away, her gut hollow until we caught stomach cancer in the nick of time. These aren't stories I pulled from some dusty medical book. They're people I've sat with, cried with, cheered for. They're proof that when your body whispers or roars in the morning, you can grab the reins and win, but only if you listen, only if you act. I've been there too, you know, not just watching from the sidelines, but feeling that cold grip of doubt myself. There was this cough a few years back, a dry hack that stuck around for weeks after a cold I thought I'd shaken. I'd wake up, throat raw, chest tight, and tell myself it was nothing, allergies maybe, or too much talking at a family party. But it lingered, gnawing at me. And one morning I caught a glimpse of pink in my spit. Barely there, but enough to stop me cold. I didn't want to go. Hospitals feel like surrender sometimes. But Uncle Joe's face flashed in my mind, that gruff later. He'd growled until it was almost too late. So I went, sat through the chest x-ray with my heart pounding, half expecting the worst. It was nothing, just a stubborn infection. But that scare stuck with me, a jagged little lesson in not waiting. I've had headaches too, mornings where my skull felt like it was splitting and I'd lie there, eyes shut, bargaining with it to fade. A quick check cleared me, But every time I think of Mrs. Lawn, how close she came. Those brushes with fear. They're why I'm here, hammering this home. Your body's not lying to you, it's begging you to hear it. So here's the lesson, the one I've seen etched in every tear, every sigh of relief, every quiet goodbye. Don't ignore the wake-up calls. Persistent headaches that pound before your coffee's brewed. Don't call them age. They could be cancer knocking at your skull. Joint pain that locks you up when you swing out of bed. Don't laugh it off as wear. It might be gnawing at your bones. Fatigue and memory fog that weigh you down, even after a full night. Don't blame the years. It could be draining your blood. Wheezing and mucus rattling your chest at dawn. Don't shrug it as a smoker's ghost. It might be clawing your lungs. Loss of appetite that leaves your plate cold. Don't call it pickiness. It could be twisting your gut. See a doctor pronto. Skishies, blood work, gopes, because early's your armor, your shield, your sword. Late, that's your fall, a tumble into a fight you might not climb out of. I've watched it play out. Those who ran to the clinic and danced again, those who waited and faded. My Aunt Hoa waited, Mr. Bao waited. They're gone. Mrs. Lawn didn't. Uncle Joe didn't. They're here. It's that simple, that brutal, that real. What hit you hardest today? Was it Mrs. Fong's osh lifting? Aunt Mai's hunger returning? Or maybe my own shaky sprint to the dock? Drop it in the comments. I'm all ears, waiting to hear what shook you, what's sticking with you. Love this? Smash that like button. It's fuel for me to keep digging, keep sharing these raw truths. If you're new, hit subscribe, tap that bell. Don't miss the next round. We're in this together. Share this with someone you love, your mom, your uncle, your best friend, because these signs don't wait, and neither should they. We're not just surviving here. We're fighting, winning, living. Let's keep it rolling. See you next time, stronger, sharper, ready,